beginners fly tying materials, mostly feathers, and I don't know if it's all that I'll need or if there's something there that I won't ever need, but didn't really know what to get, so this pack should get me started. Can't wait. So, little story about, 56, 57, 58 years ago. I was much younger, 12 years old or so, and I did some fishing. I had a little aluminum boat, 3-horse motor, and I did some fishing. Of course, back then, you had a red and white spoon called a devil. You had a mooselik wobbler, which is a silver spoon. It was kind of long and narrow. Maybe I had a jitterbug. And I had a few flies. Now, where these flies or streamers came from, and here's an example, was I had a brother-in-law. His name was Adrian Michaud. His friends called him Mitch. His relatives called him Roland. I have no idea what that's all about. But anyway, he was an avid fisherman. He was like a fish whisperer. He fished a good part of his life. He loved it, both freshwater and saltwater. He had a decent-sized boat, and he'd go all the time. But one thing he did do too was he tied flies. And I remember as a kid, I'd go down into his cellar, and he had a workbench, and with all kinds of shelves and drawers on it, and it was full of all kinds of feathers sticking out and hanging all over the place. And what he'd do is he'd tie streamers, and he'd put them on a white card about the size of a long business card, and he'd hand print his name on it and the name of the fly, and he'd wrap it in plastic wrap, and he'd sell them at the local, but back then it was like the 5 and dimes and the hardware stores and stuff. And he tied a lot of flies. Here's an example of one. This fly is left over from when I was about 12 years old. I'm 65 now. And this is a gray ghost. This is a fly that he tied. I really don't dare use it anymore. It's got rusted hooks, and the feathers are quite brittle. It's just in my tackle box. I keep it in a pocket in my tackle box. And it's kind of simple. It's got some dark feathers on the top, some sort of grayish ones halfway down, and some whitish ones on the bottom, and a couple of little it had, there's one on this side. Oh, there's one on this side too. It has a little like a eye feather on the side. I don't know what they call them. But anyway, he would tie flies, and he tied hundreds of them. And I'd go over to his house, and I'd say, Roland, I'm going to do fishing. Can I get a couple of flies from you? And he was pretty good about it. And he would have like a shoebox. And the shoebox had flies in rows and just lined up on cards. It must have been 100 of them. They'd all be one type. For example, it would be a gray ghost like this. And he'd thumb through them for quite a while. Nope. He'd say, no. Then all of a sudden he'd say, this one. And he'd pull one out and give it to me. And this is an example of one that he did that with. And I don't know how he knew, but he could tell just by looking at it, but they looked all the same to me, that one was gonna get me some fish. And sure enough, they would. For example, my sister and I would troll with a boat, or sometimes with a canoe, along the edge looking for trout. Back then they were 12, 14 inches. They weren't too big. Small lake trout. And whoever had the gray ghost early in the morning caught most of the fish, or probably all of the fish. And whoever was using a spoon or something else, would be lucky to get one. I had one fly. It was a red and white bucktail that caught bass like crazy. I mean, this thing looked like it was frayed. It looked like one of those I don't know, those little things you put on the pen and you go like this, trolls, and the hair would fray after a while, and it looked like that. And it was like half the bucktail left on it, and it was all it was funny looking. And that thing kept catching bass when nothing else would do that good with it. Why? I mean, it was half destroyed. Why? One time I was fishing, and back then I had a fishing spinning reel, and you use 8 or 10 pound monofilament line. You wouldn't use anything else, because back then anything above 10 or 12 started looking about the size of a pencil lead, and it was stiff and wiry. So the goal was you fish, and you let the bail out, and you let the fish fight it, tire them out, and bring them in. There was none of this pulling them up with a line like we do today. I had a fish, and it had to be a bass because that's what the season was. It hit it, and I couldn't get the drag loose quick enough, and it just snapped the line, and I lost that red and white bucktail fly of his, and that was like no pun intended, a sinking feeling when that happened. And I could always get another one from him, but I had to go ask. He was good about it. But anyway, that's my story about my brother-in-law, the fish whisperer and the prolific fly tire. And I'll give you a closer look at this. Little focus. So that's my fish story.